All right, we are live. So welcome back, everyone. My name is Chad Sadora, and I work for the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development. On behalf of the organizing committee, APMDD, Climate Action Network International, the Women and Gender Constituency, and Youth Constituency at the UNFCCC, we would like to welcome distinguished experts, the panel, and all those joining us online to towards our event called Towards BAM, the Public Hearings on Just Transition Mechanism. For the past few years, civil society has been engaging intensively on just transition at global climate conferences as a means to ensure that all aspects of climate action embrace the need for securing justice for workers, indigenous peoples, and communities, and support all countries in their efforts to find pathways for their people's prosperity. COP30 constituted a major landmark for advancing justice, equity, and rights through just transition. A decision was taken outlining key principles that must be taken into account when advancing just transition. On top of that, and critical to civil society demands, it committed to develop for decision in 2026 a just transition mechanism that will make all those principles and aspects be materialized. Our groups outlined several demands regarding the mechanism, which we have called BAM, that now stands for the Belém-Antalya Mechanism for Just Transition. As we prepare for the next round of negotiations, we want to hear from experts and practitioners well beyond our constituencies, their thoughts on how we can make the Just Transition mechanism work, learning from past experiences, and accelerating good work happening on the ground. Instead of holding those conversations privately, we have decided to hold them publicly and for the benefit of a much larger audience. In this session, we are honored to be joined by Belén Sánchez, Juan Daniel Acuña, and Minhu from the joint IE-iGDP Just Transition Observatory. Belén is the head of Alinea, climate action tank hosted by IE University and supported by the European Climate Foundation, and is co-director of the newly created IE-iGDP Just Transition Observatory. Before she worked as advisor to the Minister of Ecological Transition in Spain and was engaged in the coal phase-out process and the country led by the Just Transition Institute. She worked as a green jobs and just transition specialist for the ILO for Latin America and the Caribbean. Hu Min is the director and co-founder of the Institute for Global Decarbonization Progress. Hu Min was the China advisor and the head for access to cooling and LDCs for the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, a global philanthropic program supporting the transition to clean and efficient cooling technologies. For over 12 years, she was the program director for the Low Carbon Economic Growth and Environmental Management Programs at Energy Foundation China. Hu Min has almost 20 years of research and advocacy experience in clean energy and sustainable development. Her projects and research have ranged from climate policy and green finance to cooling efficiency and air quality management. She was involved in efforts to assist China in initiating its carbon market pilots and low carbon economic growth pilots in 2010. She has published articles and co-edited books on low carbon cities and environmental governance, and spoken at numerous international climate and energy forums. Lastly, but not least, Juan Acuña Roman is currently project manager at the IE-iGDP Just Transition Observatory, where he supports research delivery and coordination across work streams and contributes to applied tools and frameworks that connect climate action with social equity and implementation guidance for regions in transition. Juan previously worked at the United Nations Development Program in Costa Rica as a specialist in economics for development, supporting the green economy and NDC projects, along with municipalities and national institutions. His work covered green fiscal reform, decarbonization and adaptation policy support, and climate finance tools, and contributed to mobilizing sustainable finance and building a pipeline of green SMEs. Once again, I thank the three of you for accepting our invitation to speak in this session. Before I pass it to you, I'd just like to remind that we'll hear a brief presentation from you guys, followed by an interactive exchange with representatives from civil society. In this session, these representatives will include me, Caroline from Climate Action Network, and Serena from the World Animal Protection, which is a member of the Global Campaign to Demand Climate Justice. So I pass it on to you guys now.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Shadley. I'm gonna share my screen to show the presentation we bring from part of the Just Transition Observatory. Okay, so we are the Just Transition Observatory. It's a joint effort between IE University and the Institute for Global Decarbonization Progress, who Min and Anna both represent. In this session, we want to start very briefly on the context of just transition, what have been our findings, in what we are doing research, and how do we plan to close the gaps that we have found. So, as many of you already know, but it's always good to remind how the just transition context began since the 70s and how it has become more mainstream since the Paris Agreement. What we have seen and what we have analyzed and see other resources is that, of course, just transition has become a more mainstream topic, and we have seen it, for example, in the NDCs. We have seen plenty of NDCs mentioning just transition, and now with the efforts on NDC 3.0, we have seen it even more in detail. However, when you check what is the content of this just transition, is very superficial and very mention based. And given this context, we have seen that, of course, more definitions on just transition have emerged. Also, we have seen that more resources have been created, more catalogs, guidelines, toolboxes, indices, and other stuff related to just transition. And also that entails in more mechanisms for emerging economies are not emerging economies. Of course, we have also identified that there's a lot of heterogeneity on the access to these funds. Most of them are for developed nations, despite the awareness and the need of enabling this mechanism to other economies. And most recently, under COP 27, under COP27, we have seen the establishment of the United Arab Emirates Just Transition Work Program and its definition in Dubai, COP28, which has entailed more work, more analysis, and more focus on just transition. Of course, as we have seen, it is not enough. And in COP30, we have been flagged on this new mechanism, the Belém Antilla mechanism, to enhance international cooperation. So under this context, what have we found? And what we have found is that mainstreaming just transition is not enough, and we have to be very careful with this and not to fall in a new kind of greenwashing. We have extensively reviewed a lot of resources that are available out there, and what we have understand is that there is a lack of agreed set of standards for just transition. We understand that just transition is different for every country and region and is very complex. However, measuring progress and performance is hard to study within this fragmented ecosystem. There's also no agreed estimate on just transition finance. So this creates a gap that is not being measured. If we don't measure something, we cannot address it. So we have seen in the data, we have seen that, of course, there's a lot of information on finance for mitigation, a very bit for adaptation, but then just transition finance is completely not as studied. We have seen that there is also a lot of tools, as I mentioned before. However, this ecosystem is very crowded and is not in a coherent structure. We also have seen that this ecosystem, sometimes it could be hard to apply. It is very developed country centric, is very fragmented, and that of course limits the scope and the capacity of reaching to other emerging economies where the just transition is more critical. And of course, there are several areas of these topics that are still not studied in detail, as are some other social and vulnerable topics for emerging economies. So what has this entailed in all of these problems that we have identified? We have understood that it has made hard for countries to do an assessment of their needs and of their approaches to fulfill those needs. And this has led to a superficial just transition commitments in NDCs. We have seen that again, and this is more mainstream, but then when you see the details, it's hard to tackle because the tools that this ecosystem is not bringing the right practical tools to address those gaps. And then even when countries identify those needs, when they try to apply it on the ground, it's even harder because it lacks little guidance. It is not reflective of the reality and or their needs. So this lack of step-by-step approach and guidance is becoming more tangible in these emerging economies. And of course, if you have an issue identifying your needs and an issue trying to solve them, then the financing gear of this issue it will not work properly. What we have seen is that there's no unclear pipelines of bankable projects. There have been we don't mind to. I mean, we don't try to neglect them. There have been efforts to push finance further. However, the access to good and concessional finance is limited, and sometimes it is misaligned. And of course, this entails in slow action for the transition. And this is a small chart that we created for the EU using data from CPI. But what we want to flag here is that most of the financial flows in climate action is going towards mitigation. More than 95% of those flows go to mitigation, and to adaptation is just only 2.5%. And let's not talk about just transition. The transition is not measured here at all because we lack the standardization and maybe the fundamentals to start tracking it. And when we also track how is this finance, what kind of finance it is, we see that is project level market rate debt, which is basically this is there's no greenium, there's no premium on this debt. And what we're doing is adding more loan burdens to emerging economies in some cases. So this is also important to flag. So I will let Ana continue from this slide on.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you very much. So that's why, I mean, Juan has already explained why we thought that creating a just transition observatory, it's a good idea, because we wanted to be able to suggest, because that's our idea, to suggest a number of indicators that will help the community, the global community working on just transition to understand where are the opportunities, where are the challenges, and what's really happening when a country, a region, whatever, a private sector or a civil society organization, a trade union or others are saying that they have a just transition strategy, a just transition plan, they are showing different results. So we thought that it was good to show a proposal for, aiming standardization, that in the end is where we would like to advance. So that's our main first proposal that we have as a JTO. We are doing together IE University and IGDP. We thought it was a good idea to work think tank working on decarbonization as IGDP and university as the IE, which is more academic and more research, and joining forces in order to produce this proposal to measuring just transition. So what else we want to do? Once we have that proposal that I will explain to you a little bit later what we are thinking about, we would like to move forward to the diagnosis side. And we are thinking about measuring exposure and readiness to move towards the direction of just transition and understanding what are the risks and the capacity of those different countries. We are measuring, you will see later, information from all different countries in the world, because we would like to understand where are the gaps. And once we have better information about the gaps, it will be easier to understand what else would happen in terms of policies, in terms of investments, in terms of dialogues, in terms of governance structure, etc. So in the end, we believe it's necessary to start having this conversation, at least IGTO, on the indicators in order to be able to work on practicalities, on realities at the territorial level, if you want. And then we will be able to produce, with the idea of having tracking indicators. We have already started to work together with the ILO, the International Labour Organization, that you had already a presentation from them before us, with the core regions. But this is only one sector that we believe is super important, but not the only one. So our aim is to extend our approach to other type of economic sectors, not only core-related transition. Then again, financial alignment is very important to translate all these plans and all these strategies into realities. So we are looking forward to work a lot more on that. Support access to better fit finance for the purpose of just transition. So all this discussion about finance to us that we are only starting to understand a little bit better, it's also part of our aim. And in the end, we would like, through our website, to create a global knowledge interface, linking the needs and the experience from different stakeholders, government, practitioners, academia, civil society, and all others. So now let me show you a little bit how we are trying to close this gap. Where it's in blue for us is very important. We aim to translate just transition principles into measurable readiness, implementable plans, and finance-ready pipelines. Very ambitious, as you can imagine. So this is work in progress, very important to signal. Second thing, very important to signal, we are very new. We are only more or less like a year old. So we have been working very hard over this year to produce something very similar to what you are seeing here. So we have divided our work into 6 different pillars. You saw them: governance, economy, labor, environment, climate change, and social well-being. And what we are doing is identifying something like a little bit more, 100, 120, something like that, different type of information data. And what this information data is information that is available almost at the global level. We are aiming to have those information for the last 10 years. In some cases, it has to be a little bit shorter, but in many 10 years, because we want to see the dynamic of the process. And we are measuring 2 different areas, the green one and the blue one. The green one is structural exposure, because we want to understand to what extent the country, everything is done so far at the country level, the country, what's the level of the risk of the transition related to climate policies. So to what extent, for example, doing better in terms of climate action may mean job losses, may mean stranded assets for them, may mean social harms in any sense. So we would like to understand better how is the exposure, everything related to that. And on the other side that we are trying to measure is the adaptive capacity. That's kind of the right-hand side. What we want to measure from that? We want to understand to what extent the country is already have the capacity or has been working on that and is increasing the capacity to do the transition, because they have the skills for the labor force that they need, because they have the finance, they have, for example, a specific finance program to work on just transition. They already have the governance to do it, or the participation structure, etc. In the end, what we want to show is what you see in the bottom of your slide. So we would like to be able to explain how we believe using this information that I have talked to you about, to what extent the country is doing very well, the green color, more or less, the orange color, or you are in a difficult situation, the red color, in these 6 different pillars. And why we want to do that? For the same reasons that I was talking before, because we would like to understand what are the risks, and that means that your country needs to pay attention, a lot of attention to those areas, because you are not well prepared, or the risk, the level of exposure is so high, and you probably as a country will face future problems, or you are well positioned and you should use those capacities or those opportunities that you have to make the most of it, to create new jobs, to create new investments, to increase the life of well-being of your population, of your community, etc. And we wanted to have 10 years, 10 or less year information, because we want to understand how countries have developed over the years. And we have seen so far that many of the countries have very much evolved. Work in progress as well. And this is just an example about what we are measuring. For example, for labor, you have there a few words: employment structure and sectoral exposure, because it's important to understand what's the percentage, for example, of the workforce linked to farming, linked to secondary industries, linked to carbon-intensive sectors, etc. At the same time, for example, what's the total workforce, because that will give you the information to what extent the percentage of those sectors that are very much affected by the climate transition, it's a small percentage, or is very high, and the entire worker force of your country will be impacted. And well, I will not go into detail unless you want me to do it. And in the end, we are still working on that, so we may have some visuals, as the one that you can see at the bottom of the slide, where we have a better understanding about what's the capacity, the level of capacity, and the level of exposure of a particular country, of a region, or a group of countries. So in this graphic that you see with the different colors, the yellow ones are the best ones. In why we consider the best ones, because they have higher capacity and less exposure. And then the kind of the purple ones, they are in a very difficult situation. If you go to the other one, please. No, they are in this red space that you see in the circle, because they have very high level of exposure and very low capacity. So those are the ones that need to be, well, it's important to pay most attention. You want to mention why we have included? No, okay. Sorry about that. Then that's our thing. Other line of work that we are following is Juan was talking about practicality. We believe that we need to move forward with that. And this is what we are doing together with the ILO, just transition planning. We're working on this kind of guideline, how step-by-step kind of work, to work on core regions. It's in the slide, the step-by-step approach, practical and didactic, compile of existing resources, because we believe that there are so many great things already there that we just need to identify them and help practitioners to use it, and propose tracking indicators for each of the modules. Here you have the modules, and the other slide was the modules, and this one is a little bit how this is organized with best practices, basic checklists. For example, this is for, I believe this is for participation. No, that's similar. This is what you really need to take into account when you want to do participation. And what happens if you don't do it? Those are the possible risks that you will face if you don't follow some of the ideas that we are suggesting you to do. We also have some case studies. These regions or countries have already done that and have gone well or have gone not that well, and available tools, etc. I mean, we are doing that for all the different modules that I have shown before. And just to finalize, how we would like, I mean, what do we think that BAM could be helpful for the work that we are doing? Here you have like 5 ideas. Probably there will be many others, because BAM is really, really changing the landscape of just transition, for sure. And it's really, really something else. I've been working on this issue for many years, and to me, BAM was incredible. I still can't believe it that something like that was agreed. So something that we believe is interesting is this global coordination function of the BAM to reduce duplication. There are already a few organizations doing something similar. Maybe it's no need. Map gaps. It's very important to map in the gaps. I was talking about financing, but there are many others. And tools should connect to others rather than competing with them. So very welcome, this idea of coordination. Structured knowledge hub that is practitioner facing. We have been negotiating, many of us, for many years. That's okay, it's needed and it will keep happening. But we also believe that we need to support people, we need to support communities, we need to support those who are facing those risks and the transition challenge that I was mentioning before. And everything should be very much practical, we believe, and that's why we think that something like indicators that we can do comparison, we can do prioritization, things like that, could be very much welcome. We also believe that the support function of the BAM will be very helpful for many. For example, in relation to finance, we think that we need collectively a lot to pay more attention to financing, because it's an issue that has not been very well addressed so far, despite the different programs that have been going on. Monitoring and feedback. Very important, that sentence. BAM should operationalize technical assistance, capacity building, and knowledge sharing to enable support for inclusive transition. We also, we didn't mention, but I think it was very much the focus of Juan's presentation. We believe that the Global South need to have their own understanding, their own thinking, and their own, approach to just transition. So this inclusive transition will differ from one context to the other. Monitoring and feedback, I have already talked about that. Track implementation is important. And then my last point is explore further sectors. I've been mentioning that we're working on the coal sector, but this is just one of the very important ones that needs to be tackled, but at all the only one. We have agriculture going through a very important transition challenge, transition pathway in some cases. We also have tourism. We have many others like industry, like transportation, for example. So we need to understand what are the specific challenges that those sectors are facing, because there are so many different factors that are impacting them that it's important to analyze and to understand them. So thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to have the opportunity to present our work. And I think that now, Min, it's your turn. And
thank you very much. Maybe I think, yeah, okay, great. Juan can take out the I'm not sure I have time to use the slides. I will just share some of my observation and insights for myself working in China and my some other colleagues, partner organizations or CSOs from China about just transition mechanism, especially how to make a Belém action mechanism as an effective mechanism. So our recommendations are based on some following understanding, which I will just present with words instead of slides, which maybe another time we can use the slides. So first of all, we still see there's a substantial gap remains between how the global north and global south understand just transition. In wealthier economies, it is often framed as a managing job losses in fossil fuel sector and reforming governance system to support affected workers, leaving no one behind, which is very important. However, for many countries in the global south, it is about basic development and prosperity, extending electricity access to remote areas, growing domestic industries, and creating green jobs in sectors that do not yet exist. Both EU practice and G20 principles provided a good foundation, however, neither fully address the development first needs and institutional realities of many countries in the global south. We need a complementary frameworks that integrate national development strategies, industrial transformation, energy access, which will be essential to make just transition globally inclusive and actionable. And second, we have seen China's experience becoming more relevant, not because of the size of the economy. In fact, Chinese people are still below mid-level development level, but because China's development pathway in the past years could be used as a blueprint, not a blueprint, but an example of how development and decarbonization can proceed together, even though we are still not yet the perfect ideal scenario. Chinese president, in his remarks on climate and just transition in April 2025, emphasized green transformation is not only the essential way to address climate change, but also a new engine for economic and social development. Such transformation must be people-centered and strike a balance between multiple goods. The framing is especially relevant to China and the global south, where climate action must deliver immediate development dividends. For billions of people, just transition is not simply about economic disruption, it's about combating hunger and poverty for climate justice, which was the main theme of the opening ministerial event at COP30. So, and the last understanding, which we think is important, the text approved at COP30 emphasized just transition matters for all countries. However, there is no single model. Transition needs to go beyond the energy sector. It is a multi-sectoral and cross-cutting approach. So each country needs its own whole of society and whole of economy approach. Sectoral by sectoral approach oftentimes doesn't work. Each country faces different challenges and opportunity, and to move forward, especially in developing states, there must be support for capacity building, climate finance, technology development, and transfer backed by stronger international collaboration. So what is our recommendation? At IE-iGDP, a Chinese climate policy think tank, we have synthesized the Global South priority and China's practices together with other partner CSOs into a framework for just transition. We call it a country-led, development-aligned, people-centered framework that offers a flexible yet grounded approach to inform the future NDC. So there are following main recommendations. Number one, being country-led means that national government must own their transition pathway one-size-fits-all models rarely reflect on-the-ground reality, and externally imposed solutions often overlook critical development needs. Number two, just transition must be economically viable and aligned with development needs. Policies should prioritize job creation, industrial upgrading, and energy access alongside emission reduction. Number three, transitions should protect and empower the people most affected, especially workers, low-income households, vulnerable communities. A just transition must serve social coherence as well as climate outcome. Number four, through just transition, we need a comprehensive approach. It should also, but just transition should also should not be narrowly should also be narrowly defined and focus on development, not to cover too many topics into this discussion. Otherwise, it will not work. We need to focus on development. As of issues like critical mineral, it might not be suitable to discuss within this topic. Last but not least, China would like to, we suggest the Chinese government, together with other development countries, to work together to enable substantive actions to make the multilateral just transition mechanism work for all development issues. And developed countries just transition mechanism under multilateral collaboration should not tie too many strings, should help narrow the North-South development gap, not to create a separate, different mechanism advancing certain one sector's issue. I think I'll stop here, and we hope we can work together to make the BAM work for all countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, Juan, and Humin. It was I thought, very excellent presentation. We went a little bit over time, but I think your very concrete recommendations and very astute analysis made up for that extension. I won't try to synthesize your points anymore and go straight to the question, since we have about, I don't know, 10-15 minutes. We started a bit late, so maybe we can we can extend a little bit this session. So I'll pass it now to the CSO panel and ask them if they have any questions. Just raise your hand. We'll do one round of questions in one go, and then Juan, Humin, and Anna can decide how they want to answer those questions. So Caroline and Serena, do you have any questions you'd like to ask? Serena, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your insights sharing. And it's actually China Lunar New Year. So first I want to say Happy New Year. It's the horse year. So I wish you a lot of energy and passion in the coming year. As you talk, actually all of the speakers talked about how to explore further sectors and move beyond energy sectors when it comes to emission reduction. And what we call the hardbone sectors emission, which is more relevant to people's daily lives, like food system, like transportation. So I really want to ask Humin on this. Ms. Humin, as you shared a lot of insights at GDP, and I've also read a lot of reports from IGDP, specifically several on food systems. So I'm wondering, like, how does the BAM, the new mechanism, will translate into national level, especially when it comes to the food system emission reduction in China? Thank you.
Thanks, Serena. And before you answer, Humin, I'll ask Caroline first. So we take the questions in one go. Go ahead, Caroline.
Yes, thanks so much to the three of you for these really insightful presentations. Learned so much from them, and pleasure to join you from snowy Montreal this morning. Happy Lunar New Year to all. I wanted to ask about just transition finance because, as I'm sure you know, we hear from certain parties that, you know, this idea might be a bit duplicative. So it's very, and obviously can supports the importance of this type of finance specifically for the just elements of the transition, which right now are not covered by traditional streams of climate finance. So I'm curious to hear in particular from the Just Transition Observatory how you define it. Just because I think that can help us as civil society make a better case against certain of the arguments that we hear. Thanks.
Thanks, Caroline. And for me, I just like to add one last question. So, because I don't think we can do a second round, we don't have enough time. It's related to on finance, and it's kind of a running theme throughout the sessions today. In the previous sessions, we also had a lot of discussion on finance. Juan and Anna mentioned the need for finance alignment, especially for just transitions on the ground in developing countries. But how? I just wanted to ask a concrete or try to get something concrete on how you think a just transition mechanism can address the need for finance for southern countries, for developing economies, especially in this context of the crisis of multilateralism, and where most of the financial mechanisms that we have, the JETPs, or even the financial the funds, the climate funds that we have, are still very donor driven or donor dominated rather than needs based and driven by the recipients more. So how could just transition mechanism, in your view, address this gap, so to speak? Thank you.
Thank you. I will go first, and then I'll let Anna and Juan answer. So first of all, I want to clarify that I share Juan and Anna's presentation because we have this joint observatory. But at the same time, the observation I have shared were mainly based on China experience and China CSO insights. So they're slightly different angle, but I think we share the common long-term goal. And also I want to, and then answering the question about the food system, I think first of all, when I say it should be a comprehensive approach going beyond the energy sector, I would emphasize a holistic approach that should be defined by the receiver country or the global south country that needs more support to just transition. So no matter it's food, I had myself experienced the idea of energy sector should be the focus. But then I have met other countries in the global south, they may not have, that's not probably the single most development issue. And then they need to work on other sectors. And I would emphasize it should be decided by those countries instead of by the donor country. And it should be a system within one country, but comprehensive, instead of have a one sector cutting across all countries, just transition mechanism. It should be country by country, not sector by sector in the international discussion arena. That's my suggestion. And second, I think on food system, absolutely, it's very, very important. And it's also not only one country, but also in many countries, especially between countries, the trade and different issues can impact. It is very important also to help the farmers to realize the potential impact of climate change on food system. It's a lack of awareness, not only in global south, but even in global north country, some of the farmers. And on finance, I think I suggest, this is my own personal suggestion, might not be true, but I think I suggest we don't mix the climate governance discussion with just transition financing discussion, because the climate finance discussion is already very overwhelmed and crowded. And just transition finance need to come from not only climate governance finance, which is a very small area, but also coming from all the other development finance, public finance, even PPP mechanism. So when we're talking about just transition finance, I would suggest we leverage multiple approaches. And the key question is not about where to get the money. The key question is how to let people, when they spend the money, they concern about the just transition issue. So every money spent, every dollars, every penny need to have a awareness and indicator, as Anna mentioned, to be able to address the just transition gap. I think that's my address. The last, I want to thank you very much for Happy Chinese New Year. In fact, now is also a Ramadan and other many festivals going on around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Min. And I mean, I will elaborate in what Min has said on climate finance, answering to Caroline and to Chadley on the two last questions, because of indeed the climate finance area, it's very dense, it's very solid, and it has achieved a lot. But what we're here is just not to create another framework for finance, but rather to understand how just transition is transversal to climate action and how it accelerates climate action. What we have seen is that it's not being mapped. We have taxonomies for what is mitigation, what is adaptation. However, when we try to measure what is just transition, it's very hard to do so. And it's important to do it because then it allows us to understand what are we doing and how does that reflect on the experiences and outcomes of each region and country, which we are not able to do today. In fact, I read a recent paper on ILO, on journal, and just a brief example. It mentions that green employment in France do an analysis on surveys of employment, which is very dense, shows that green employments are giving lower quality jobs. And that is something we need to avoid. If we want to work toward just transition, we need to keep the metrics right so that when we go on the field, when we deploy that money, when we deploy that finance, then we can track how it's impacting people's lives. If not, we are in this area where we can generate some backlash on climate action. And that's not the point. That's the opposite of the goal of just transition. So I would leave it there and maybe...
Yeah, a couple of comments from my side, which are very similar, I believe, to what Min have just said. I mean, maybe three comments from my side. First of all, I think we need to start a global discussion on what just transition finance means. That has not started yet. And that's going to take some time because there are so many things to be analyzed to understand very well how the different just transition funds that have been out there from different perspectives, JETPs, the Just Transition Fund here in Europe and some others, have functioned and why they have gone well or have not gone that well. That's a first question that, I mean, really, my idea is, highlighting the need for further analysis on that has not been yet that much. There are a few organizations doing that, which are very welcome, but it has not been widely out there. Secondly, there is already a lot of money out there from all the different budgets from all countries in the world that have some kind of just transition impact, for sure. If we talk about, for example, the skills provision, the informality, everything related to energy or related to whichever infrastructure that may have a just transition approach. So we really need to understand what is how all those funds should have or can be shaped in the way that just transition needs are well met. That we believe it's where it's not yet done. It's not done yet. Sorry. And the third element is that I think it was the idea of Juan's presentation in the slide with all these different graphic on funds. There is a lot going on mitigation, and there is very little going on adaptation. So we already know that there is that gap over there for sure. And we need to understand how just transition is impacted, because adaptation is very much about things that are not necessarily energy, are things about food, are things related to coastal areas, to buildings, to many other things. So we need to understand better how the impact of just transition needs in the money that is already there. And again, calling for additional analysis on that. And then we also need to understand that we have different, at the global level, we have different financial mechanisms, financial instruments that can be used with different purposes. So we have some grants that will be able, of course, to meet some of the needs from, I don't know, vulnerable countries, regions, maybe. We also need loans that will be great for some other particular context that they have the ability to pay back, and that's going to help them a lot. And they have other types of things, green bonds and things like that are being used by many countries already. But we don't understand very well what is needed in which case and how they combine. And I think this is an analysis that it needs to happen. We also have the IE-iGDP 3.0. Many countries already have launched them. So we know what, in principle, in theory, we know what are going to be the challenges that those countries are facing in terms of spatial adaptive capacity if we want to take our approach. So we need to translate where the aims of the NDCs already, which is the national policies, into what does it mean for finance. Do we have the finance? Do we need additional more? Do we want them? Can we do more with the money that we have because we can do things better, etc. So a whole new dialogue to happen. We need to organize one of those only with finance. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Anna, Juan, and Humin. I thought that was a very excellent session, very, very concrete. And that I think that's what we require right now, those very concrete and actionable recommendations that we can, especially us from the social movements and civil society and observer constituencies of the UNFCCC, that we can draw insights from in our interventions, in our campaigning, especially in the context of the operationalization of the just transition mechanism. So I'd like to thank the three of you once again, and to our CSO panel too, for that very, very excellent discussion. This is on YouTube, so I'm pretty sure a lot of policy wonks will return to this again and again. I'd also like to say I'm sorry, Humin, that we didn't manage. That's our fault. We weren't able to manage time better. But
No
you
problem.
can send your presentation to Francesca or to Annabella, and we can try to because I'm really interested also in seeing the presentation. And yeah. So happy Chinese New Year and happy I don't know the greeting for Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak. And thanks again. And for those of you watching, this is the last session for today. But on Thursday and Friday, we will continue to have more sessions with a very broad range of experts and very excellent ones too, just like this group of three we just had here today. So thanks everyone, and we can